Shri Gurubhyo Namaha, Vanakkam, Namaste, and this is once again our Azadi ka Amrit Mahotsav Thinking Forum. We have been continuously thinking about several freedom fighters, and today in this session we shall again think about certain great souls who had contributed enormously for the sake of the country's independence. One such personality, not well known to the outer world for a very long time, and one who had been disowned by his own family members. However, the country owns him. We all are so happy and proud to be a descendant of this great person. And who am I referring to? None else than Madanlal Dhingra. Madanlal Dhingra was born on the 18th of February 1883 in an affluent Punjabi family in the city of Amritsar. His father was a doctor. In fact, his father was serving as a doctor in the government service, the then government which was formed by the British. Madanlal studied at Amritsar and subsequently at Lahore. He was troubled to see the poverty existent in the country. He started researching into the various aspects of poverty, its production and prevention, and gradually realized most of the poverty that was seen around was all because of British exploitation of Bharat's resources. He started advocating self-sufficiency, and as we have already seen, one way of self-sufficiency in those times was to boycott foreign goods and start using indigenous resources, including spinning of khadi. Madanlal in 1904 was a student in a college, and an extremely interesting incident happened. Interesting for us today from our perspective, but from Madanlal's perspective, an incidence of importance, incidents that changed the trend of his own life. The principal of the educational institution in which he was studying ordered for blazers to be owned by the students, and the command was blazers of imported cloth. Remember, textile was being imported. Why so? Cotton and all the raw material was taken from here, and that raw material was being made into textiles and brought back to the country with all the taxes that go along with such production and import. This is where the economic exploitation was. It was our own resource, our own raw material which was being taken there. So all that money that was required for processing was taken from us. And then it was processed there, it was made into some kind of a material and then imported back. And the tax on import, tax on the production, tax on the produce, everything was on the heads of the Indians. When the principal ordered for the blazer to be of imported cloth, Madanlal was agitated. He led a kind of an agitation of all the students together and protested against this order. His father, who was occupying the ranks of a civil surgeon in the British governmental service, was upset. He thought Madanlal was being unduly anxious and should not participate in the agitation. Madanlal left the college. He said, I do not want the studies. If I would have to obey the British order and go against my own country, my own nation's self-sufficiency, I would not want to continue studies here. So he left the college. He also had to leave home because his father would not let him come back home without tendering a letter of apology to the principal. Madanlal was not interested in giving a letter of apology. He bluntly refused the father's request. And the father, in the bargain, would not let the son come back home unless and until he obeyed the order and tendered a letter of apology. So, as a consequence, Madanlal had to leave college and become a dropout. However, to sustain himself and work to the cause of the nation, he had to find some kind of income, some kind of livelihood. So he took up a job at Kalka. The job meant some kind of menial work. Somewhere he had to earn money. So he did all coolie work for which he obtained daily wages, and then somehow he was able to sustain himself. He, of course, had to shift jobs, and very many occasions he would be dismissed from whatever job he was in, primarily because he would agitate against the British and would not obey some kind of a British command. Somehow, mustering some kind of support from friends and well-wishers, in 1906, he departed to London for further studies. In 1906, he arrived at London and went to the India House. The India House in London was established as a place for the Indians to meet and dwell. In 1905, by Shyamaji Krishnavarma. 1 year later, 1 year after the establishment, Madanlal Dhingra arrived at the India House and came in contact with Vinayak Damodar Savarkar and Shyamaji Krishnavarma. Madanlal Dhingra, who was already a kind of a rebel when he was in college and in his teens, he was a kind of a rebel and had rebelled against odd British orders, was now attracted by Vinayak Savarkar and Shyamaji Krishnavarma. Gradually, he got involved in revolutionary activities and he parallelly obtained training in shooting and also became a secret member of the secret society by name Abhinav Bharat Sangh. Because of his activities in the Abhinav Bharat Sangh, he was shadowed and surveyed by the British police, and there were occasions when the British police kind of took him for investigation and inquiry. All this information reached the father, who was at India at that time, and the father disowned the son. Not merely disowned the son by just saying, "You're not my son," but went to the extent of releasing a newspaper notification saying, "Madanlal Dhingra is no longer my son and not in any way attached to my family." This did cause a lot of setback. Imagine the kind of mental turmoil Madanlal Dhingra would have to go through. Think of how his associates would have looked at him. However, his love for the nation was so great that he did not bother about this kind of disowning and notification. At the same time, there was some kind of thinking in his mind about assassinating some of the important British officials who were against India. It appears that he thought for some time of assassinating Lord Curzon, who was responsible for the partitioning of Bengal. There was some kind of pain in everyone's mind. Every Indian was painfully struck by the decision of partitioning the state of Bengal. And Madanlal Dhingra was also one amongst them. Maybe he also thought of killing a few other officials, but all those probably stopped at the level of thinking, or there could have been a few failed attempts. However, sometime around 1908, he seems to have thought of killing Lord Curzon Wyllie. Curzon Wyllie was part of the Indian political department. To just give you a brief information on this, there was something called the Indian political department in Britain at that time, something part of the British government system, wherein the officials in the Indian political department were responsible for administering the Indian part of the British Empire. The Indian civil service was also part of the Indian political system. So there were Britishers who became ICS officers. There were Britishers who became magistrates, and there were also other officials who were running the administration from their own tables. Curzon Wiley was part of the Indian political department and was also a kind of an aide, a political aide to the Secretary of State. The Secretary of State was in charge of India, the Indian subcontinent. So it is likely that Madanlal Dhingra saw what all Curzon Wiley was doing, kind of feeding wrong information about India, releasing wrong messages about India, kind of leading the official to administer India the wrong way. So, Madanlal Dhingra was constantly watching Curzon Wiley and decided to kill him. In 1909, on the 1st of July, there was a function of the Indian National Association. Indians who had stayed in different parts of England for their studies or job or other opportunities had formed an association, and there were also Britishers who were members of this association because they were supposed to be administering India and they were supposed to be knowing more of India. So in a function of this Indian National Association at the Imperial Institute, Madanlal Dhingra decided to kill Curzon Wiley. He knew Curzon Wiley was to participate in the function. So, Dhingra fired a continuous stream of 5 shots at Curzon Wiley and his wife. They were together. They were side by side, and 5 shots were aimed at them, targeted at them. Curzon Wiley fell down. Mrs. Wiley also fell down. However, there was another Parsi doctor who ran to hold Curzon Wiley and kind of save him from the shots. The next 2 shots, the 6th and the 7th shot, straight hit that Parsi doctor by name Dr. Lal Kaka. And the entire episode led to a lot of commotion. Madanlal Dhingra did not try to escape. He knew what he was doing and he courted arrest immediately. The trial began on the 23rd of July 1909, and in the trial, Dhingra justified himself, not saying that he did not want to do this or anything of that kind, but then saying, I did this in the name of Indian independence and because of my patriotic love to my country. His statement goes like this, and you could see that on the screen. English people have no right to occupy India, and it is perfectly justifiable on our part to kill the Englishman who is polluting our sacred land. I am surprised at the terrible hypocrisy, the farce, and the mockery of the English people. Just see the kind of force that his words have even today. Once the trial was over, the judgment was pronounced and Madanlal Dhingra was found guilty. He was given a capital punishment, to be killed by hanging. And once the judgment was pronounced, Madanlal Dhingra's reactionary statement was this. He looked at the judge and said, "Thank you, my lord. I don't care. I'm proud to have the honor of laying down my life for the cause of my motherland." And he was taken to the gallows. He was lodged in the Pentonville prison and then taken to the gallows at the appointed time, appointed hour. He was to die. He was to die on the 17th of August 1909. And when he was taken to the gallows in the wee hours of the 17th of August, he said, standing there at the threshold of death, "I believe that a nation held down by foreign bayonets is in a perpetual state of war. Since open battle is rendered impossible to a disarmed race, I attacked by surprise." You understand what he's trying to say? The bayonets were on the side of the British and the Indians were disarmed. They could not carry any arms. And he says, since open battle is rendered impossible to a disarmed race, I attacked by surprise. Since guns were denied to me, I drew forth my pistol and fired. Poor in wealth and intellect, a son like myself has nothing else to offer to the mother but his own blood. And so I have sacrificed the same on her altar. The only lesson required in India at present is to learn how to die. And the only way to teach it is by dying ourselves. My only prayer to God is that I may be reborn of the same mother, Bharat Mata, and I may re-die in the same sacred cause till the cause is successful. Vande Mataram. Standing at the gallows, he said, Vande Mataram. He could chant Vande Mataram at the threshold of death. He was hanged. He was denied any proper rights. We do not even know what happened to his body at that point of time. What happened to his mortal remains? Was it given any kind of respectful farewell? However, sometime in 1976, so many years after his death, while trying to locate the remains of Shahid Udham Singh, I'm sure all of us do remember Udham Singh, and there was a request from India, from independent India to Britain to give back the remains of Udham Singh. So when they were trying to locate the remains of Udham Singh, the remains of Madanlal Dhingra, the coffin, was also accidentally found and brought back to India. Even today, some of the remains are kept in a small place called Akola in Maharashtra. However, even till the turn of the 20th century, his family members, the descendants of his original family, biological family, disowned him and said they were not interested in knowing about him. Madanlal Dhingra was a true son of Bharat Mata, a true son who lived and died for the sake of the welfare of his mother. And there you see the postage stamp that the government of India had released in honor of Madanlal Dhingra. Yet another personality about whom we shall see today was a lady who lent all her support not only to her husband and her family, but to the national movement of India. She was born on the 1st of August 1899 and was called Kamala. She was the daughter of Rajpati and Jawahar Atal Kaul and later became Kamala Nehru. You all would have by now known as to whom I am referring to. Kamala, the wife of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. As I told earlier, Kamala was born on the 1st of August 1899 as the eldest child of a family which had 4 children. She was married to Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru when she was barely 16 years of age. Soon after the marriage, Jawaharlal Nehru went on a trip to Himalayas, completely overlooking Kamala. Later on in his autobiography, he recorded how bad he felt, later realizing that he had almost overlooked her. After marriage, Kamala involved herself in the national movement. The family was already in the national movement. Both Jawaharlal Nehru and his father Motilal Nehru were all activists in the Indian independence movement. And so Kamala also plunged herself into active politics. During the disobedience movement and the non-cooperation movement, the role played by Kamala Nehru was enormous. She organized groups of women, consolidated them, made all of them come together, and even picketed shops which were selling foreign goods. Friends, one of the most important movements during the freedom struggle was to boycott foreign goods. We already know the reason for that. We've seen that in the life of Madanlal Dhingra also. However, there were shops which were selling foreign goods, foreign clothes, and so on. As part of boycotting foreign goods, people removed their foreign garments and foreign clothes and put them to fire. Put all the foreign textile material, clothing into fire and burn them. The other way was to go to those shops and make the shopkeeper understand that selling of foreign goods might fetch that particular person a little extra money, but would corrode the nation. So women used to picket the shops. Groups of women would go to the shops and try appraising the shopkeeper and try tell people who come there to buy things not to buy foreign goods. However, picketing was not easy. As they picketed, they could be arrested. Kamala Nehru was one of those bold women who would lead groups of other women to picket. shops which were selling foreign clothes, foreign goods, and even liquor. She was a very bold lady. It is very interesting to know as to how the British officials got a little scared of her. There was a time when Pandit Nehru was arrested and jailed. However, he was to deliver a particular speech at one of those nationalist meetings. A few days before the meeting was to be held, he was arrested. So now what is the situation? People would naturally think that Nehru will not be able to participate in that nationalist meeting and deliver a fiery speech. And everyone knew that participating in that kind of a meeting and trying to consolidate the forces towards nationalism would only mean the speech would be labeled seditious. Seditious against the King of England or the royalty of England. Now, in that situation, when everyone was expecting that Nehru would not be participating, Nehru was represented by Kamala Nehru. She took a prepared speech from him, went to the spot and started reading out the speech as his representative. Imagine, he is already arrested and inside the jail. What would an average woman have done? Would have got herself hid. She would have hid behind the curtains. She would have remained indoors or would have been scared that the husband is already arrested. But here was a bold woman who was prepared to face this situation, face the police, and still prepared to contribute to the cause of the nation. And that was when people really understood that she could do anything for the nation. Of course, she really posed a threat to the British police because she could get several women to join the non-cooperation movement. She was a very soft person, but a firm person too. She was soft, but would still speak softly and muster all support and solidarity. And in several occasions during the freedom struggle, because of her activities and her involvement in the nationalist movement, she had been arrested. There are times when she was arrested along with Sarojini Naidu and her own mother-in-law, Nehru's mother. Once, when she saw how things were happening around, and when she saw the nationalist leaders being injured, when they took out processions, when they agitated, we've already seen several occasions where the leaders or those participants in the nationalist movement were all injured, lathi charging, some kind of an injury, pushed down, such things. And their health was failing, or they could not take care of their health. Now, when Kamala Nehru saw all these things, she started a dispensary in her own house called the Swaraj Bhavan. She converted a few rooms in Swaraj Bhavan to become a kind of a dispensary which would serve the Indian National Congress participants and leaders, and rooms which would serve as hospital rooms to treat the wounded activists, the family members of the activists, and other residents of Allahabad also. It so happened that after her death, Mahatma Gandhi decided to make this particular Swaraj Bhavan into the Kamala Nehru Memorial Hospital. Kamala Nehru also spent some time in Mahatma Gandhi's ashram. She befriended Kasturba Gandhi. Both of them developed a very close friendship. One other person who was in that nexus of friendship, it was indeed a kind of a trio. Kamala Nehru, Kasturba Gandhi, and Prabhavati Jayaprakash Narayan. They were all freedom fighters. It's very unfortunate that Kamala Nehru contracted tuberculosis at a very young age. And the last few years of her life, she would frequently fall ill. And because it was known that she was afflicted by tuberculosis, and remember, tuberculosis did not have appropriate and complete treatment in those years of the 1930s, she had to be moved abroad for treatment. Especially the climate, the ambience, the surrounding conditions mattered in the treatment. She was taken to a sanatorium in Switzerland. And you know who took her there? Not Pandit Nehru, because Pandit Nehru was arrested and jailed at that point of time. It was early 1935 and her health was deteriorating. It was essential that she was moved from the tropical India to a place like Switzerland. She was to be taken there and Pandit Nehru would not be let out. And it was Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose who took her first to Baden-Württemberg in southern Germany, and then she went to Switzerland. Of course, in Baden-Württemberg, when Kamala's health deteriorated, Pandit Nehru was released from the prison and he rushed to Germany in October 1935. She was brought back for a small, short span to Switzerland and then taken back to Baden-Württemberg. However, all the treatment could not help her come back, and in February 1936, she died. She died at the Lausanne Sanatorium in Switzerland. Pandit Nehru, in a chapter in his autobiography, states as to how he missed her and was heartbroken when she passed away. Today we have a lot of institutions in the name of Kamala Nehru. But remember, that great lady who thought of the welfare of the people around, even when the members of her family were inside the jail, and even when her own health was not up to the mark. And that was Kamala Nehru. Whom shall we see next? We shall see the life of yet another revolutionary leader. This revolutionary leader was born on the 1st of August 1882 in Allahabad. He was opposed to the thought and the deed of partition of India. He spoke against partitioning India. He was a kind of a revolutionary leader when he was part of the Indian National Congress and the nationalist movement. He studied law and practiced as an advocate. And all these are the attributes of Purushotham Das Tandon. Purushotham Das Tandon was born in a middle-class family in Allahabad. He obtained a degree in law. He wanted to study history, especially Indian history. So he tried doing a master's program, but then was completely dejected that the study material did not have much information on his own motherland. In 1906, he started practicing as a lawyer and joined the bar of the Allahabad High Court in 1908. However, next few years, his concentration was on the nationalist movement and to take part in public activities more actively and vigorously. He gave up his law practice in 1921 itself. For some time, he did work as a college teacher. He became a member of the Indian National Congress while he was a student way back in 1899. Then he represented the Allahabad area and the Allahabad region in the All India Congress Committee. And when the All India Congress Committee set up a separate Congress Party committee to investigate and inquire into the details of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, study as to what happened and find out how best there could be compensation. Purushotham Das Tandon was part of that committee which analyzed the Jallianwala Bagh incidents. In the 1920s, he was deeply attracted to the non-cooperation movement, the civil disobedience movement, and he was actively participating in these movements in the 1920s and 1930s, arrested several times and imprisoned several occasions at several jails. In fact, in 1931, even before Mahatma Gandhi could return from the Round Table Conference, both Pandit Nehru and Purushotham Das Tandon had been arrested. Purushotham Das Tandon was a friend of the farmers. He served as the president of various Kisan Sabhas, and he was also involved in the Servants of India Society, and of course with the Servants of the People Society called the Loka Sevaka Mandala, which was started by Lala Lajpat Rai. When the provincial government was formed, he became the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly from 1937 to 1950 of the provincial government of the United Provinces. Later, in 1946, he became a member of the Constituent Assembly of India, and Mahatma Gandhi called him the Raja Rishi. Raja Rishi. Though he was opposed to the partition of India, He was an advocate of modernization and wanted a unified India. He was a staunch believer of ahimsa and he wanted to be an example himself. He believed in the dictum, lead by example and not lead by words. As an advocate of ahimsa, he refused to wear leather chappals and started using only rubber chappals. Something happened when he was a member of the parliament. He did become a member of the parliament. When he became the member of the parliament, his salary was dispersed in the form of a check. So once he went to the parliament office and asked the officials there, the clerical staff there, to send his salary directly to a charity organization. Now, people who were standing next to him were a little surprised. They asked him as to why he was giving such kind of a standing instruction. Even the officials were surprised. And they asked him, "It is just about 400 rupees that you receive as allowance. And why do you want to send this 400 rupees to a public service fund? Why do you want to give it to charity?" Look at the way Tandon ji replied. And that reply befits his being called a Raja Rishi. He said, "I have 7 sons and all are earning sufficiently to raise their families. Not only that, each of the son would send me 100 rupees. Each of them would send 100 rupees per month. That means 7 sons, 700 rupees. I spend about 300 to 400 rupees for myself, all my expenses. And whatever rest I have that month, I give it for some kind of charity or philanthropic causes. So this allowance as an MP allowance itself is something that I get as an extra. Even that, whatever my sons give me, I have some portion which is extra. So this is extra. Why should I save it for myself or my family?" It was because of this kind of an austere approach, I believe, he was one who deserved the title Rajarishi. That was Rajarishi Purushotham Das Tandon. And all these people give us so many lessons to live by. Simplicity, trying to be charitable, give to others, whatever we have, share with others, and do not save beyond the demand. What is required, keep that alone and don't hoard. And even that, what is required within quotes, keep the demands and the needs at the lower ebb, what is essentially required, without being given to pomp and kind of, grandiose. And people like Kamala Nehru, who belonged to a very affluent family, still thinking about the welfare of others. People like Madanlal Dhingra, who was born in an affluent family. His father was a doctor, a civil surgeon. Still wanted to contribute to the country. Decided to become a college dropout and did menial jobs, not for earning money, not for hoarding, but to sustain oneself, to sustain because only if one sustains himself or herself would be able to work for the country. So what kind of personalities these were? People who had not merely contributed to the independence of this country, but people who had been the foundation, people who had manured all the growth and fertility of this land. Friends, during these Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav celebrations, let us remember these great men and women, salute them, salute our nation, and take a pledge that we would follow them on their footsteps towards the cause of building a wonderful India, towards the cause of making India a Vishwa Guru when she celebrates her 100th year of independence. Jai Hind.